was simultaneously for Heroes. Let's not act like all this was just for one character.
Yeah,
Let's like
we know we still didn't
hold on, I'm not done. I ain't even done, Nico. You definitely gonna have to let me finish.
Thing I want to say is the hate for Dressrosa isn't like just soft. The hate for Dressrosa like radiates because people who are like dub only, they had to wait like 2 to 3 years to get to Dressrosa just to get to the dub of it. That's some hatred for people on that end. So I understand like you the pacing because dub people, that's a whole experience that I would never want to go through. Of like I'm watching One Piece, I gotta go through 2 years to get through an art that people keep telling me sucks. Or
Yeah, the staggering does throw it off a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, yeah, that's actually a good point. Dub compared to sub is a little. Dressrosa wasn't redeemed, especially when he goes into Gear 4 in dub. It doesn't give the same effect that it gave in sub. But it's to me, it's still not bad. It's still goofy, like Oda wanted it to be. It's even goofier in dub, but some people don't like how it sounds with it being that goofy.
I will say I'm on my rewatch right now of Dressrosa, and maybe it was just the hype. Excuse me. Maybe it was the hype of watching it the first time, which ranked it so high. But I'm like watching it, I'm just like, man, I don't know. It's not hitting the same way anymore. It's really not. It's still it's a great arc, but it just ain't giving me the feeling I felt the first time. Maybe that's just because I've went so much further through One Piece, and maybe because it was the thrill of it being new.
I can explain that for you, Bree.
All right, hold on. I'm almost done, and you got it, bro. I do think that it was the thrill of it being new, because when I first went through, I had rated it. I mean, it was top 3 arcs for me. Absolutely top 3 arcs. Now, it might squeak in the top 5. I don't know, honestly. And especially with Elbaf and freaking Egghead being out, it might be lucky to get into the top 5. Even I started watching it on One Pace just to see if that would help the pacing, which it does. But I don't know, the content of it just doesn't hit for me no more. I don't know. I think again it was just new. I don't know. All right, you got it.
Now, I feel like the sooner people understand this, the better One Piece will digest for them. The action scenes are not going to be what is the staple for you. It's the moments and the emotionals, the emotion that the moments cause. For example, right? Luffy punching the Celestial Dragon is an action scene. Very memorable scene. A lot of people remember that. It's a hype moment everyone calls to. But when you peel back the layers of that scene, you understand the weight of why Luffy is even punching him. You know, everything going on in the arc. Like someone like Luffy finally deciding like, oh no, I'm gonna hit him. You know what I mean? Shout out Zoro, who was about to cut him down prior for no goddamn reason, just because of some nonsense. Neither here nor there. The point is, those moments, even though they're action based, it's the emotion of the moment that holds more weight, other than the fact that, like, for example, Zoro versus Lucci. In the anime, it's action packed. That shit look crazy in the anime. But the moment of that fight don't hold as much weight as Zoro versus Ryuma. Or Zoro actually gains something after that fight. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just shit like that. So I just feel like in general, as a fan base or as individuals, when you understand One Piece is the type of story where it's not the action scenes, the action scenes will be memorable, but it's not the action scenes that's the staple, but it's the significance behind why that's even happening that is the staple. I feel like once you come to that conclusion, you'll still be able to watch Luffy turn Gear 4 and be hype as fuck. Because it's the reasoning behind that moment of you realizing like, oh yeah, he been holding back since he popped out in the new world. And you done finally pissed him off, Dofi. You the one that done finally pissed him off to this point. Oh yeah, he's gonna hit you hard as hell. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you view it through that lens, it's still as enjoyable as the first time. That's all.
Okay, so this is what. Okay, so is that you speaking in general, or are you speaking into Zah's original point about Dressrosa? Because if you're
in general,
I'm about to say Zah's point. I'm about to say in general.
But in general, that's still in general. Again, Dressrosa falls in my general point. But It was a general.
But to Zod's point about Dressrosa is that you're right. You're completely right, Trick. But that's what plays more into Zod's point because they take the emotional moment and they keep showing it to us. We just passed that moment. We don't need a flashback right back to that moment. And they started doing that right after the Puma flashback, even in Egghead. But they didn't keep that up. That was just for like 1 or 2 episodes. Whereas Dressrosa, they stretched that where you're seeing that the whole arc. You would just show us some stuff with Rebecca, and instead of moving on, or after we have moved on, you will then again show it. You will put it right back in our face, and it's like, dang, we trying to move forward and progress and let the moment sit, but it's hard to let it sit because you keep kind of force feeding it. And I only feel like that was done because they did stretch out the arc of Dressrosa in comparison.
You think that's the only time that was done?
Because the manga wasn't as long as the anime.
Do you think that's the only time that was done?
This whole series.
It's the only time it was done. That's the only time it was done. That exaggerated.
I think Momonosuke was more exaggerated.
That is the max. As far as
I think Momonosuke was more exaggerated.
That is the one arc that, to me, I could agree with Zod completely, and because it's even proof when you compare the amount of chapters it was to the amount of episodes it was, and they did drag it out. Because when you go back and watch those episodes, most of the moments that were dragged out were the moments when Soldier Son was backstorying it with Rebecca, and you kept getting flashback to the same scenes, and then they would explain the scene, and then they would still flashback to the scene, and then they would move on to a new scene, and then when they drop that scene, they start picking it up with the new scene that they're doing it with, which I'm not mad at, but they didn't do that for Law. They didn't do that for Law's flashback. They didn't do that for anyone else's deep dive they were going in for. They only did it for.
Did they not do that for Momonosuke to a greater degree? No, to a greater degree.
Not that exaggerated. No, to me it was way more concise, which is why we enjoyed the Oden flashback and we enjoyed going through. Like only Gashimo was dragged out, not really dragged out. I would say to me it was rushed. He didn't spend enough time on it. Remember, he sped up the ending because of Film Red and all this other stuff he had going on and everything. Oda was on a different time schedule, but I argued Wano deserved another year. That was me personally. Wano could have won another year, and I wouldn't have been mad. Some people would have been, but I wouldn't have been because of the amount of time we spent getting lore to Wano. But that's all besides the point. Going back to Zod's point, I get why he was saying it's dragged out and he doesn't want to completely like rewatch it like that. So I'm not mad at that. I know a lot of people that feel that.
I'm not gonna lie. I think this might be a hot take. And Reed, you could let me get my shit straight. You can clip this if you want to. I think Dressrosa and Skypiea are the best rewatch arcs of all of One Piece. Me personally, I think they're the best rewatch arcs of all of One Piece.
Wow.
Mind you, Sabaody is still my top one, but you know that you gotta arrive and then get dispersed and then return. You know that's a whole debacle. But as far as we come there, handle business and leave, I think Skypiea and Dressrosa are one of the best like actual.
I can't speak on Dressrosa
arts. You know,
I think that.
I think more so because I really rock with the opening. That Hard Knock Days is a theme anthem for me. You know, that Hard Knock Days is a theme anthem for me. But shout out to
I agree on the Skypiea. Trip, to the point you were saying with the emotional ties instead of the action type part. I agree with Za because of your point. Because at the end of the day, when you are feeling that emotion. And Dressrosa, they'll pull you away from the emotion to do like the cutscenes of the niggas running through the city. Hey, we gotta start the bird cage.
And then they'll try to go right back to the flashback.
Yeah, like I'm about to say, like you be like,
that's the thing. Okay,
because they pull you away from those emotional moments to kind of like, hey, you got to keep coming back to the bird cage, them running through the city getting destroyed, type shit. And then now we're back on this emotional moment, and it's just like, yo, like I don't.
They pulling you away from that emotional moment, and then giving you the bird cage catastrophe, so that when Luffy hits Doffy with that, all you do is cage people line. It holds more significant weight.
That takes away from the actual writing, because in the manga it wasn't like that. So when you exaggerate it in the anime, you make us feel lackluster about what it actually is. So you have to, only if you're a true manga fan will you be understanding of to what they're doing. if you're not a true manga fan and you're just watching an anime, you're like, yo, why did you doing? Okay, I get it. Rebecca don't got a dad. Her dad's.
I ain't gonna lie. I wasn't reading. I wasn't reading One Piece.
I've watched this with random people and heard them say like, okay, we back to her. Okay, I get it. Is she gonna get a devil? Now they starting to think more about her. Is she gonna get a devil fruit? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's not that hype. Oh God, it's not that hype. Now giving her mad attention for no reason. Like they did for Bonnie, but for Bonnie, like I said, it made a little more sense because Bonnie ends up turning into Gear 5. On top of that, moving on, they did that for one. They did that for one episode, and literally they already saw it. And that to me, that's when you could tell when you're doing that. It's a pacing issue. You're trying to fill in the gaps until you get to the next. We know what's coming next episode. You're trying to fill in the gap. The chapter's probably, you're trying to get the chapter to run to a certain amount of time. So you're putting in what I call, like I said, the necessary filler. So instead of putting in a necessary cut scene, they're not doing that. They're giving you a piece of that flashback that they just gave you a whole run about in Kuma's flashback again. And it's like, why are you doing that when we just saw that? Mm-hmm. And that's the issue that they have to fix. That's why when they said when they're going seasonal, they're going to try and go chapter for chapter. They're trying to go one off. So they do any necessary filler is going to be just actual cutscenes. I actually think they're trying to get this shit right. So I think that's all Haza's point. We don't want to see y'all doing that. Like imagine seeing Marineford like that. Like every time you see Ace, it go back into the same flashback that we just saw. No one wants to see that. We got flashbacks to Ace, but every time we got it, it was able to move from the plot point and go forward. Imagine if it kept going back to the same scene we saw. It'd have been like, yo, bro, we get it, bro.
I don't need to imagine anything because at the end of the day, all that shit for Rebecca was simultaneously for Kyros. Let's not act like all this was just for one character.
Yeah, we know.
Hold on, I'm not done. I ain't even done, Nico. You definitely gonna have to let me finish. Now, at the end of the day, all that shit was not just for one character. It was for both Rebecca and Kyros, who were both very important to the plot of Dressrosa. So you could not give us a half-assed Rebecca, Luke, without showing the soldier interaction with it, which is what extends all that. Because a lot of readers, again, they're not as deductive reasoning as us. They're not going to catch on that the soldier is actually her dad. Not until, again, I always express this. Oda don't want us to realize a lot of things until Luffy realizes it. Some things, not a lot, but some things. So it's like, again, that was meant to be hit, which is why, again, leading up to the fight with Diamante, even why they stretched her shit out, is because that was going to be Kyros' moment when he finally could. Again, I feel like there's two of the hardest lines in Dressrosa for me. Again, like everyone, the chat can feel how they feel about this. Please, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to read it. I'd like y'all takes on this. So we're gonna go for. We just rated best quotes of the year. You know what I'm saying? My favorite quotes in Dressrosa is Luffy saying Doflamingo's full name because he done actually pissed him off that bad. Saying Doflamingo's full name after punching Bellamy. And Kyros telling Rebecca to put down that sword. Telling her to put down that sword doesn't hold as much weight without, what was given to us prior to that. Now, could we have gotten less of it? I'll agree. Yes, we probably could have gotten less. But if you're going to really truly depict a father-daughter relationship to that degree where in that kind of tragedy happened, would you cut corners? I don't think you would. So I feel like it was necessary and it's fitting. Because again, that drop your sword moment don't hold weight without the stretch of what we know of the backstory.
Wait, so Trip, yeah. with less, so you said we could have got less. Would less have affected that in a negative way?
It wouldn't have affected it in a negative way. It's so for example, that moment right now is already, it's like a top 2 quote of mine. Mind you, Zoro did what he did to Pika in Dressrosa, and I ain't include that. You feel me? And he said what he said to Pika. You know what I mean? You frog in a fucking whale. He requoted the greatest against that nigga. I didn't even bring that up. The point is, it wouldn't have, without the stretch of the flashback, that statement wouldn't have held as much weight, which is why it's like the number 2 quote of that whole arc for me. Without the flashback, like that would have just been like, of course a dad would say that, of course a father would say that for their daughter. But like, because of the flashback, I've watched this series and read this series so many times. Every time I play that scene, I choke up, and I don't have a child. That's the only way I can express that. I can't express that no further. I have no kids. And every time I watch that scene, I choke the fuck up badly. Because he meant what he said to her behind, drop that fucking sword. I mean it. Yeah. Like I just, again, without the flashback, that shit don't hold that much weight. And you know what I mean? That's the only reason why I say that.
If you enjoyed that clip and you want to see more clips from the podcast, you can click here. If you want to see the entire podcast, you can click here.